The nitrogen market over the next decade is set for a lot of volatility and significant transformation, with Western Canadian farmers poised right at the crossroads of global demand, shifting supply, and geopolitical forces. Global nitrogen consumption is expected to keep on rising, and Western Canada's unique position, capacity, and ongoing regulatory framework will mean that farmers need to be resilient, strategic, and forward thinking to thrive. Nitrogen is at the heart of Western Canadian production, and we are kind of at the end of the pipeline when it comes to things like urea and UAN. One of the projects that AgVisor Pro has been very involved in as a partner on our platform is Genesis Fertilizer. Today, I want to introduce you to the CEO of Genesis Fertilizer, Derek Penner. Derek had the opportunity to meet with a bunch of our farmers in our Power Farm meetings, and you know that I've been a proponent and behind the Genesis Fertilizer project because, as an agronomist and staring into the future, I think that Western Canadian farmers having more control over their fertilizer supply is really, really important. So, Derek, welcome to the AgVisor podcast. Why don't you do a quick introduction of yourself, and then we'll get into some of the updates and Q&A.
Perfect, Rob. Thank you very much for the invite, and look forward to a fruitful conversation about the project and, the macro dynamics that are hitting Canadian farmers today, even as we speak on the fertilizer prices. Rob, as you mentioned, I've been recently appointed as the CEO of Genesis Fertilizers, effective July 16th. 3 months ago, basically to the day. It's been a bit of a drinking from the water hose, even though I've been involved in this project in some fashion over the course of the last year. So I have a lot of familiarity with the project. I've been in the agricultural space for over 20 plus years. Principally, I spent a lot of my time with Monsanto. I was a CEO for a couple of years of the Canadian organization. I was the head of strategy and licensing and product management for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for a few years as well. And, I've been all around the world. I've visited with farmers pretty much on every continent. And so I'm very familiar with the ag space and the global dynamics of both seed, chemicals, and fertilizers.
Well, global perspective, global awareness, and then focusing now on solving a potential issue, a problem in Western Canada, a challenge that really needs to be addressed. We're going to be collaborating with Genesis Fertilizer at AgriTrade, which is running in Red Deer from November 5th to 7th. So if you're at the AgVisor Pro booth, we'll invite you to download the app and join the Genesis Fertilizer community. They're one of many companies and expertise that's on the AgVisor Pro platform. And then together, we're hosting the unofficial AgriTrade party at the Silver Buckle on the 6th, starting at 8 p.m. Of November in Red Deer. And that's always a great party. Good to have you part of us. Now, a couple of things. We're going to divide this up into those who are still learning about the Genesis Fertilizer projects and those who have an understanding about it, but we're going to provide more detail, Derek. Let's just start from a 30,000-foot level. Let's just try to level set here with an understanding of what this project is, how big it is, and what it means to farmers. Why don't you set the stage there?
Okay. One of the things that I always say is, you go into a project and you make a decision about whether you want to be involved in it based on the viability of the project. And, one of the things that's really attracted to Genesis is a lot of the global dynamics that you mentioned on the onset, and the difficulties that and challenges that we're going to be facing Western Canadian agriculture over the course of the next decades, in particular fertilizer pricing. When you look at fertilizer pricing historically, it's, farmers we know of paid the highest or pay the highest prices in the world for their urea, and they will continue to pay the highest prices in the world. And it wasn't too long ago where you would see that the price of fertilizer was sitting in and around on average around $525 a ton, based at retail price. But over the last 4 or 5 years, given the political and global dynamics, whether it be US or Russia, Chinese tariffs, etc., we've seen a big step change in fertilizer pricing. And, I would say that based on the numbers that we see through the market research that we've done is the average fertilizer price per ton has jumped from $525 a ton to $750 a ton. And that's all been driven by market dynamics, not cost of production or anything like that. So we are going to see that step change continue. Farmers will continue to continue to be the highest. Western Canadian farmers will be charged the highest price in the world, and we need farmers to come to the table to participate along this extremely profitable value chain. I've never been involved in a project where I see something even of this magnitude. It is a huge project. We're talking $2.5 billion to $3 billion in total capital costs and construction financing to get this going. Um, and it is a big, big mountain to climb. I mean, the fact that we've gone this far with a grassroots project is incredible. And when I look forward, we can't do this without other people coming to the table, but including government. And I think that's extremely important. And I know we'll get into that later, but having government, some kind of strategic and farmer support, which we've got a lot of during to this stage, is going to be extremely important in getting this to final investment decision.
So, for those who haven't heard, the Genesis Fertilizer project is located on 370-ish acres in the Belle Plaine area of Regina. They've got the input for electricity. They got input for natural gas. They've got input for all the water supplies they need. But they've also got offtake in the form of carbon dioxide sequestration into a carbon dioxide project, and then offtake from farmers. Now, this is one of the projects where it's a multi-billion-dollar project, and farmers can participate up to 75% equity, from what I understand, in the project. And so Genesis is really one of those things where it's a natural business model. Whether it's been PricewaterhouseCoopers or MNP looking at the numbers, the margins are there. Some of the lowest natural gas prices in the world, some of the highest prices farmers pay for fertilizer. And even this last spring of 25, some of the farmers, some of the retailers ran out of urea this year. So there's been a lot going on. I've been following the development and ongoing progress of Genesis Fertilizers, Derek, for quite a while. I just wanted to talk a little bit about structure of the project, in particular about your board of directors, which is quite strong. I'd like they just met you. You've got global and deep Canadian experience. Let's talk a little bit about the board, and then we'll get into some more of the progress, some current news.
Yeah, perfect. You want me to just elaborate on the board and who we got?
Yeah, I think a little bit about the structure of the company. Yeah.
Yeah. So upon my appointment to as a CEO, I also agreed to become a director on the board. So myself, I'm a director and officer of the organization. Our board is comprised currently of 5 board members right now. Myself, 3 independents, and the founder of the project, Jason Mann, who is still on the board. Um, our independent board is comprised of, I would say, a very good mix of talents and competency. We have Ian Craven, who was a former partner at MMP in the consulting world and has been operating in the ag space in some way, shape, or form with MMP over the course of the last 30 years. We have Garth White, former president of the Fertilizer Canada, who also has been in the ag sector for a number of years, and Kathy Jordanson, who was an executive VP with Yara North America, specifically working out of the Yara Belle Plaine facility, which is just so happens to be right across from the location where the Genesis Fertilizer plant is being proposed to be produced. So we have a hugely capable board, both acting in finance, in governance, and in operations, and kind of bringing my skill set to the picture on working around projects around the world is a vast complement to moving this project forward.
Let's round this out with just a little quick introduction for your CFO.
Yeah. Yeah. So Mark Smith, he's our CFO. And again, I probably have some of the dates mixed up, but he started with the organization in, I believe, late 23 or early 24. He worked for Nutrien and a spinoff of Nutrien, which was Ineos. So he's very familiar with North American urea, phosphate, potash base since he's been in that role for a number of years. And he's, like I said, he's been with the organization now for a couple of years and is a huge asset to our organization when we look at our financing abilities to move the project forward.
As I stare into the potential of this project, and I don't have a vested interest in the project other than I'm passionate about farmers having more control over their supply, and a Western Canadian production facility would be really, really important. I think about what Genesis Fertilizer could be producing in terms of urea ammonium sulfate. My understanding is that the DEF, the emission fuel fluid, is already has an off-taker involved in it. It's an important project, and farmers can participate by becoming equity stakeholders in the project. Um, and that would mean that they would be buying their fertilizer at the market price, but they would be getting the profits as a uh, shareholder and an advantaged shareholder in the Genesis Fertilizer project. Could you just scope that out a little bit? What it means from a farmer's perspective, Derek?
Yeah, I mean, if you look back historically, as I mentioned earlier, where the price of fertilizer if you look back from 2015, even back to the mid 1970s, that number that I mentioned earlier about the average retail price to a farmer was around $525 a ton. The market never changed, and I think you mentioned a lot of really salient points about why the project is so positive, but one that's to me is the most important is the fact that we have a supply deficit in North America. So in rough terms, there's 16 million tons overall between the US and Canada that's used in production, and roughly 10 million tons or so of production in North America. So any way, shape, or form you look at it, 6 million tons has to find its way into the North America market to fill that gap. And because of Western Canada's landlocked position, currently the most efficient way to bring these exports into North America is through New Orleans. And so the reason why farmers pay the highest price in the world is that freight and currency differential from the global markets. So, as so long as there's a supply deficit, and that will continue, if you look back historically, that supply deficit hasn't really moved a whole bunch. It's closed a bit, but not much. We will continue to see the supply deficit, and that pricing that Western Canadian farmers pay for their fertilizer will continue to be the highest in the world simply because of that. So, in looking at a new plant such as Genesis Fertilizers being built in Western Canada with the ability for Western Canadian farmers or Canadian farmers, not just Western Canadian, to participate in investing in the project affords them ability to participate along the value chain. And so today, when you look at the typical value chain, um, let's say $750 a ton, the cost of production right now, even on the high end in Western Canada, even with our low natural gas prices, is around $150 Canadian, just for the pure variable costs to produce a ton of urea. So there's other costs, there's financing costs and overhead and stuff like that come into play. So right now, today, farmers don't participate in anything along that value chain. They basically have to buy from retail to support their needs for fertilizer. So the next biggest profiters in there are the wholesalers and retailers. So they make a small sliver of that profit between the cost of production and the retail price. But who's making all the money right now is the CF Industries of the world, the Nutrients of the world, the Yars of the world. And in fact, if you wanted to, you could probably go to, well, not probably, you can go to Yara's public records, their financial records, because they're a publicly traded company, and you will see that the Yara Bell Plain facility is Yara's highest cash flowing profitable company in the world. And that just tells you that there's a huge opportunity to invest in this project and reduce your overall crop input costs.
You know, that I in my earlier years before I founded AgriTrend, I was a fertilizer retailer, and farmers would always say how much money we made. Well, a lot of times we moved 2,205 pounds of product for $20. Now, sometimes it was more, sometimes it was less, but there's not a huge amount of money in retail, not a huge amount of money in wholesale. It's about volume. But the money is really in production. And even if you slice that and call it $200 a ton production, and you're selling 800, there's a big chunk of wheelbarrow cash in between there that exists. Let's touch on this real quick, Derek. What is the position of Western Canadian farmers, the potential of their position inside the Genesis Fertilizer project?
As far as their ability to hold equity in it?
Yeah, and how much equity could they hold of the project?
Yeah, so I mean, if farmers were willing to come to the table, I would say they could uphold up to 70 to 75% of the equity. There's no doubt that there's going to be a need to bring in a strategic partner into the fold. Um, we've had a lot of preliminary discussions with banks and government, and that's what they need to see. They need to see someone who has experience in the industry, operating the facility. So I would say that if you're going to bring in a strategic, they have to have some kind of meaning, at least some meaningful representation. So that would be around 25%, maybe even a bit more. But today, I would say that farmers have the opportunity to participate 70 to 75% in the project if they so desire.
So you've got representatives going around the country right now, and farmers, they're sitting at kitchen tables of farmers. The project, if you look into the future, is a 2029, 2030 type of project. Farmers got to be looking at that and saying, okay, I'm willing to put some money down to see how this turns out. My understanding is that they would put down 15% now, and that would be money that would be utilized by Genesis as you guys are getting to get shovel ready. And when you're shovel ready, the farmers would have to put down the other 85%. They would be buying fertilizer, Genesis urea at market price, and then they'd be participating as a shareholder, enjoying those dividends. A lot of financial advisors tell farmers they should have off-farm investment. Well, I think this one is an off-farm investment in a fertilizer plant that could be extremely lucrative, that's a direct benefit to the farm and the farmers themselves. Did I get that all correct?
Yeah, I would say that's pretty accurate. I mean, and again, I hate to go back to the Yara facility, and the history around that. I mean, it was owned by the Saskatchewan government at one point, SAS Furco. And, obviously I don't have all the numbers, but if you look at that plant and you look at it, it's been now 35 years later since it first came into production, and it's still spitting out the most significant cash flow of Yara's facilities around the world. And I think, investors or farmers in general need to be thinking about the long-term aspect of it. These plants will last 50 plus years. And the amount of cash flow that will spit out over that time frame is not, I would say, not normal to typical investments. I mean, there's no guarantees in life, an investment, but if you look at just investing in a typical company on the stock exchange, you're not going to get as favorable conditions as you would with a project like this.
Yep.
In my opinion.
Well, and and the structures are getting old. I mean, the newest plant is 30 years old in Western Canada. So this is a good time for Genesis Fertilizer project to be coming forward. I want to encourage the listeners to download AgVisor Pro on iOS and Android. And Genesis Fertilizer has a community on AgVisor Pro. Genesis Fertilizer will be at AgriTrade in Red Deer with us and hosting the unofficial AgriTrade party on the 8th at the Silver Buckle Saloon in Red Deer. We hope to see you guys there. A lot of this, Derek, revolves around trust. And, so much has happened to get the project to this point. But there's been some leadership changes, so I want to talk about that and and how has that unfolded. It has resulted in you taking the helm as CEO. Where are we at right now with all
Yeah, so I mean, the previous CEO stepped down in June of this past year. The board immediately went to the market and said that they were looking for the replacement, given some of the challenges that the previous CEO had faced. So I would say within a month of this initial discussions with the independent board, I've signed on to take on this challenge. My whole mandate, and this is my practice wherever I go and whatever I do, is to provide 100%. Well, I wouldn't say 100%, but 98% transparency, because obviously there's certain things and discussions that take place that we simply just can't share with the broader market at this point. But I would say this is that we do face challenges. It is a big project. Um, I would label this grassroots effectively. I mean, we have I would say, over 2,500 farmer investors who in some way, shape, or form have invested in this project along its time frame. And we need a lot more investment. And, we would be kidding ourselves if we didn't think this was going to be a challenge. And to get to 75% equity, farmers have to be willing to come to the table with $400 million. So I look at all that and say, that's extremely important. But my mandate coming in and the changes that I want to look at is we have these representatives across Western Canada out there, knocking on doors and sitting at the table with farmers across Canada. But my mandate is to let them continue to do that. My mandate is to get government support for this project, bring in a strategic investor. And as you know, Rob, I mean, over the course of the last, 7, 8, 9 months, there's been a lot of change in the political environment in Canada and around the world. And there's a lot of support out there for major projects. I mean, we have the Canada Growth Fund out there who would be investing in projects like this. We have Canada Infrastructure Bank. We have on November 4th, a new budget will be set out, and the Innovation, Science, and Economic Development Fund will be mandated with a strategic response fund in response to bringing economic sovereignty to Canadians. And this project fits extremely well. It's like a puzzle. It just kind of fits in hand in glove, and we really need the government to come in and support. And I would say some of the conversations I've had right now is concerns around public image. And I would say that if you came and asked me this question 5 years ago when there was no farmer investment into the project, I would say, okay, I can understand that. But today, we have over 2,500 farmers who've put in a significant amount of capital. And if any time is the right time for a government organization to come in and support this project, it's now. It's now.
Excuse me. Let's talk about the capital that's come in so far. How has Genesis utilized that capital so far? What have you guys been up to, and where are we going? You've made some significant strides with respect to the front end engineering and design. Let's chat about that.
Yeah. So I would say that number one, as was with any, I call this a mega project. It's not cheap to move these things forward. We had to bring in I'll call it a elite team of engineers into our project. So we have around 8 engineers with our team. They've been with us for over 2 years, I believe now. And that's, a year of costs, related to doing all the pre-feasibility and pre-basis of design, and before we even signed any of the contracts related to the front end engineering and design work. So, that's not cheap to do that. It's not cheap to go out there and look for strategics and look for ancillary capital to come in to support the project. And then on top of that, when we did sign the feed back in November, and then the ancillary technology contracts with Tyson Krupp and Stammy Carbon and Carbon Co on the carbon capture side, all those contracts in themselves are quite significant, in excess of $60 million commitment to finish those out. So even at this point in time, it's not insignificant amount of capital to get to the end of feed.
Yeah, you've got to do all the groundwork with respect to the engineering and design. You started getting your contracts in place. Notables such as PricewaterhouseCoopers, PwC. You've got people like Pool Construction Limited that are on the horizon. So you've got it. You're dealing with some pretty big. You're dealing with some pretty big badges here. And
Yep.
the one thing that continually impresses me is these companies aren't going to put their badge behind a project that they are not confident in. So I've met with your board several times. The board is independent. Kathy, David, Ian, not investors. They've got a lot of wisdom. Kathy just continues to impress me all the time. And uh, where are we going in the next little while? If farmers were coming up to the Genesis booth in Red Deer at the Agri-Trade, or any of the shows coming up in Saskatoon and Manitoba, a lot of farmers still don't know about Genesis Fertilizer. Manitoba, a lot of farmers in Alberta still don't know about it. Heck, even in Saskatchewan. So um, give us a little bit of a pitch.
Okay. Um, well, I mean, I think we've hit a lot of the high notes on the pitch. I mean, the one thing I've said over the course of the 3 months and meeting with various groups, whether it be public or private, is this is one of those projects that I would almost coin as too good to be true.
Hmm.
You talk about the fundamentals around it and you say, wow, that just can't be right. But, I've never come across a project like this in my entire career around the world that, even at this stage where there's still uncertainty around the capital cost of the project, that's why we're doing the feed. The fundamentals just make a lot of sense. We pay the highest prices in the world. We got the cheapest natural gas in the world outside of Middle East. Let's just be frank. We're never going to ever be able to compete with them. Natural gas is the key feedstock to produce urea, and we've got a supply deficit which will continue to grow. Fertilizer trends are telling us that there's more and more fertilizer being used. Um, there's not an incentive for the big players out there to invest in their capital. Like as we mentioned, the youngest plant in Canada is the Yara plant. There's no inkling out there to invest because these things are pumping out so much cash. Why would they go and invest a bunch of capital here in Canada when these things are pumping out the cash? So we're going to see all these aspects that are kind of lining up. It's almost like the stars have completely aligned for a project like this to come forward into Western Canada.
I've taken quite a bit of heat personally for you know, being an advocate for the Genesis Fertilizer projects. And the more that I've learned about the project, the more that I've learned about the governance, the people involved, uh, you know, and the transparency throughout the project, the more convinced I am that the project is so important for Western Canadian farmers. I brought you in to talk to my farm groups shortly after your announcement as CEO, and I got to say, Derek, that that was pretty eye-opening for a lot of farmers. A lot of people have preconceived ideas, preconceived notion that somehow this investment in Genesis Fertilizer is not being managed well. And I would counter with the fact that it is being managed well. In fact, when a farmer puts in an investment, the money doesn't go in your pocket. The money goes into a organization that's designed to basically manage and provide transparency and accountability for the funding. Can you talk a little bit about if a farmer strokes $100,000 check for that 15% or whatever it is, 50,000 or 15,000, doesn't matter, for that 15%, where's that check go? And then how is the money utilized?
Yeah, so because we're offering out a security for investment into this project, you have to go through a regulatory process with the Securities Commission. We've engaged a group out of Calgary called Access Capital. They are what we call our exempt market dealer as a service provider. So every time we go to meet with a farmer to invest in the project, you in typical whether it's this project or even with your local financial advisor, they have to do something what's called a know your client. They have to go through all that to make sure that you are an accredited investor. And so Access Capital is there to number one is to make sure that the dealer representatives that are out there and pitching the investment in this project are following all the protocols and criteria to ensure that they're the right group or right investor for the project. And then Access Capital's mandate is or duty, I guess, or responsibility is to ensure that we're complying with all the rules and regulations as it relates to selling this type of security. Once we go through all that uh, rigor and check, and everything's in line, then Access Capital comes to us and says, "We're all good. We've submitted this information to the Securities Commission, and we're good to release the funds to Genesis to forward and spend on the project." That's the
So
general.
as you look forward to the next 6 to 12 months, Derek, what's on the horizon here? What are your big the big milestones that you need to get through?
Yeah, I mean, well, the biggest milestone is we're halfway through the feed. We've just completed what's called the PDPs. Those are the process design packages. Those are I guess, the initial every technology that we're bringing in, whether it's the ammonia, the granulation, the melt, the UAS, the DEF. Um, there's a PDP related to basically engineering papers that basically tie everything together. And our feed providers, DLE and C out of South Korea, their job is to integrate all those PDPs into one. And then once that's done, which it is now, the job is to go out and start determining quantities for the project and going out and start getting quotes for what it would take to procure the materials. And of course, in conjunction with that, they're working with PCL out of Edmonton to come up with what the final construction costs would be for this project. So by the end of June, I'll say June, July 2026, we should have the feed completed. What comes out of that is a more robust or more granulated capital cost for the project, which allows us to go out to financial institutions and get funding in place and give them more confidence around the cost. Because today, the cost is so early stage, not all the detailed investigation had been done, but we had a pretty good idea that it's going to be in the range that we've been presenting out to the market over the course of the last couple of years.
So the front end engineering design, big engineering company out of Seoul, Korea, basically making sure that everything couples together. You don't want a 10-inch pipe coming into a 14-inch flange. That's probably not going to work. So that's a big chunk of their jobs right now. Okay, so a lot has happened. We had the project that was lifted off the ground. You're in now. Very often, these projects take different leadership at different stages. Let's wrap this up with a personal thing. Why do you want to do this, Derek? This is a big job. I've been an entrepreneur my whole life. People say, "Well, congratulations, you're an entrepreneur." Wow. Well, there's a lot of days when that CEO role is really hard. This is not easy. It's a big dream. Why do you want to do it?
Yeah, I mean, let me just say this. I mean, I didn't agree to coming into this role very lightly. It's a massive challenge. Um, but I guess my whole life has been experienced by challenges and successes. And I believe that this project has legs. And I felt that I could bring a lot of value into the project, specifically around kind of my background in agriculture, and my ability to consummate, strategic investment experience from around the world. And hopefully, I guess my goal is really to make this happen. And if we make this happen, it's not only a benefit to Western or Canadian farmers across the country and all the investors, but it's also going to be a huge benefit to myself. And I can't beat around the bush. I mean, if we make this go, it's a big deal. I mean, there's not too many billion-dollar projects in the world out there that someone can hang their hat on. And quite frankly, that's as good as it gets.
Yep, as good as it gets. The rocking chair thing, when you're, in your latter years, you're sitting on a rocking chair looking back over your life, and you say, I helped make that happen. That's a pretty big deal. So congratulations to you, Derek, for taking on the CEO role. I say that with admiration and sympathy, because I understand that it's a hard job. Uh, Genesis is on AgVisor Pro. They've been on for a while. They have a community there. I want you guys to download AgVisor Pro. It's an application, an app on iOS and Android that allows you to connect as farmers and ranchers to experts and companies like Genesis. We are teaming up with Genesis this year at AgriTrade in Red Deer, November 5th to 7th. We'll be hosting the unofficial AgriTrade party at the Silver Buckle Saloon with Genesis. We've even got a live band this year. So we're going to be having a great fun. If you're an exhibitor, you're a farmer, we invite you to come out to the Silver Buckle on the 6th to join us. And most importantly, rub some shoulders with the Genesis folks, get to know this project a little bit. And again, if you're a farming operation in Western Canada, I think that it behooves you to roll up your sleeves and really study this opportunity and get behind it. Thanks for joining us on the AgVisor podcast. And Derek, thank you for being part of this.
Thanks, Rob. Really appreciate the time and look forward to reconnecting down the road.